Hello and welcome to Spirit Sherpa, the show that helps and encourages you on your journey to unlock your magic mojo. I'm Joshua Radewan, your co-host, here as always with the Spirit Doctor, Kelle Sparta. Again,
Hi,
has anybody called
buddy.
you the Spirit Doctor in a while?
No, I don't really use it except for here. So, because when I started using that moniker, I was like, yeah, people will get that spirit doctors like witch doctor only more friendly, right? They'll get that. But no, they fucking don't. People are like, oh, you're a doctor? I'm like, no, it's a spirit doctor. Spirit doctor. What? Okay, so yeah, the, it's like that. Yeah. So my whole life is kind of like that these days because I've been post surgical for a month now. I had a hernia surgery a month ago, which, as it turns out, was a double hernia surgery because I had an umbilical hernia, which is a hole in your belly button where your intestines come through. Oh, yum. And then a split of the muscles of the abdomen. And so I had both of those. And so I ended up with stitches from just under my diaphragm all the way down below my belly button. I look like I really literally need to get a tattoo of a zipper stitched across my scar. Still waiting for it to heal, but that will happen. So and so I've been post surgical for a month, which is why you and I have not seen each other than our Marco Polo in our Woo You and Psychic Mastery program. And in a month, we haven't podcasted in a month. Well, over a month, because we didn't do it for
Yeah, it's been
like
over
a
a month.
week or two before. So we podcast 60 days in advance. So we still have a couple more episodes on the can. So yay! But we're going to be a little more timely here for a bit because we got to build up the backlog again. So, but yeah, the weird thing about being post surgery is that I am having this weird reset of my body. I've lost 10 pounds in the last month, and actually in 2 weeks after surgery. And I talked to the doctor about it yesterday. He's like, yeah, that's actually pretty common. I mean, the acid reflux I was having is gone. I'm not craving food at night after dinner. I'm eating less and smaller portions and feeling more satiated. And he's like, yeah, that's actually a pretty common effect of abdominal surgery. And I'm like, I wonder why that is. Now, part of it is, they give you massive amounts of antibiotics before you start, right? Because they don't want you to end up septic. And so, you have to rebuild your gut flora as you start. And so I did that. I'm actively on probiotics, the moment this started, the whole 9 yards, right? But it was just, it's very strange to have it be that significant of a reset. And yet he says it's anecdotally common. They don't have any studies on it, but anecdotally it's common. So, yeah, so weird things that we talk about before we go into the spiritual world. You could just say the bad humors got let out when the belly got opened, that could happen. But yeah, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting perspective on things. So,
I think it's kind of funny that you're considering getting a zipper tattoo up it as we're, kind of segueing into the death of the former self.
right? Nothing says, my totem animal is a snake than a zipper tattoo up the center of the belly. What? We can shed this skin anytime we want.
Yeah,
Not
that's
exactly what I
funny.
had planned, but yeah.
Yeah, I started getting my snake tattoo last month myself. I got the Sword of Truth with the caduceus tied into the caduceus coming up my back. And, about 3 minutes in, I started thinking, wow, this is going to be a process. I'm already 14 hours in under the needle with it. And I still got the wings and everything to go. But,
Wow.
snake is, Year of the Snake. We already did an episode on it, but, it continues. I was just actually hanging out with one of my medium friends yesterday, and she has a bearded dragon. And all part of the reptile family. But it was funny because her spirit dragon was having a tough shed. And I remember when I had a snake, and when it, like when I was going through the identity shift stuff in Wu Squared, and I was struggling, my snake would have a tough shed. And I realized that symbolically for her as well. That's what was
Yep.
going on. Yep. So good stuff. All good stuff.
This is what happens, man. Today we're going to be talking about dying to yourself. And we're doing that because, this is the reason we're doing this episode is because that's kind of where we are, right? So, have you ever seen Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist?
I have not.
Okay, so it's a TV show that aired, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe longer. Oh, I think it was longer. It was a while ago. Anyway, every show is a musical. Every episode's a musical. So, and the premise of the show is that she's in an MRI machine when an earthquake hits in San Francisco, and the MRI machine goes crazy, and she comes out with superhero powers of being able to. It's not a superhero show, but anyway, she comes out with these powers of being able to hear people's heart songs, and so people sing their true feelings to her in a way that nobody else can hear. Right. And so anyway, at the beginning of the show, her father is dying, and he's going further and further into himself, and it's a very interesting and emotional show in a good way. But the last episode of the first season, the dad dies. Right. No spoilers. He's dying in the beginning. You knew that was coming. Right. And so Spirit has been dragging me towards a new way of being. And, I just turned 56 at the beginning of this month. And so, I'm in my second Saturn return, and, no big surprise. Spirit's going, okay, time for a whole new way of being. This run, burn yourself out, fall down, get up, do it again thing is not working for you anymore. And we're done with this. You're going to learn how to be patient. You're going to learn how to sit, which is why I'm 2 weeks behind my healing schedule, despite having tons of people sending me healing energy. I am 2 weeks behind because Spirit's like, no, sit your ass down. No, sit your ass down. No, just sit. And I'm like, but I'm bored. And it's like, too bad, suck it up. And I'm like, so having these conversations, Spirit and I. And I'm like, okay. And I'm just getting to this point where I'm like, about 3/4 of the time, I am okay with this. 3/4 of the time, I'm like, yeah, I was tired. I'm really enjoying my downtime because I pushed really hard to get everything ready before I went in for surgery. And because I knew I was going to be out for at least a couple of weeks. I did not realize it would be a month and a half, but at least a couple of weeks. And I was like, yeah, I'm tired. So, okay, I could just chill and cool and do the absolute minimum necessary to keep the business going. And it's all good. And it's been very interesting to watch myself go through this process because I have this ability. I'm hyper focused does not begin to describe. So I had a client in town in September for a private retreat. And I was deep in conversation with her, and we were working on an energetic level, and I was hyper focused in. And evidently my husband came up next to us and said, I'm going to XYZ, I don't remember where, and I'm going to be back in blah, blah, blah. And I did this. And I, probably 10, 15 minutes after he left, I looked at her and I looked around and I was like, did Jeff leave? And she's like, yes. I said, did he do this? And she's like, yes, he walked up right next to us and said he did that. And he's leaving. And I'm like, I have no memory of that, right? Because I was so hyper. She was like, wow, you were really focused in. And I'm like, yeah. And so that's the problem, right? I'm very good at hyper focus, but I'm not very good at being coming out of hyper focus and being present and retaining the information because I'm in the hyper focus. And that's what happens to me in work. Is that I hyper focus into the work and hours go by. And then I come back to my body and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm exhausted. What? I blew past, right? So I'm learning a new way of being, right? But, all of this, it sounds like I'm telling a freaking story, and I am. But this is the whole point, right? When you're going through dying to yourself, you have to learn how to be different. And in order to learn how to be different, you have to understand the way you are so that you can break the pattern of how you are, right? And so, and there are certain things. I'm at the stage of evolution where, things aren't in either good or bad. There aren't things that are either inherently healthy or unhealthy. It's complicated, right? So, hyperfocus is not inherently bad. When you want to do heavy duty magical work and you want to be doing energy work for others and you want to be reading other people, hyperfocus is kind of necessary, right? You don't want random thoughts wandering through your working. You don't want, random entities wandering in because you weren't focused enough and you didn't have the boundaries set strong enough and things like that. You don't want any of that. So, it's necessary, but there has to be a balance to be had where if you go into it, you have a ripcord you can pull to get out of it, right? And so, and that's there. It's a fine line to walk. You're looking for balance, right? So when we're going through the process of dying to ourselves, especially if we're doing it consciously. So sometimes the universe inflicts it upon you. It's like, this will happen and we're going to rip everything away that keeps it from happening. And then you will capitulate because damn it, it's time. Right. And other times you do it consciously. And for me, this one's a little bit of both. Right. The universe made the recovery slower. So it's like a sit down bitch, and then part of it is conscious choice on my part. Right. So, but regardless of which one starts it, you should be the one to finish it. Right? Because you're the one who's engineering the next stage of your evolution. Okay. So as we're going through this process of learning how to evolve ourselves, that's what I'm going to say is evolve ourselves. We have to consciously choose who we're becoming. And so part of the conversation my husband and I have been having, because I am an external processor and he is a wise man, is that we are looking at, how I'm being asked to be different, to be differently in my own life. And the other piece I'm looking at is purpose, right? Finding something to drive me, to keep me moving forward, right? Something to not drive me, inspire me. Drive would have been the old me. Inspire is the new me, right? And, about, I don't know, it's probably about 10 years ago now, the drive part disappeared because the drive had been, I have to share this message with other people. I have to share the knowledge with other people to make it worthwhile to have spent, my entire freaking life working on it, right? And that felt fulfilled about a decade ago. I was like, yeah, I no longer feel like that's necessary. I feel like it was sufficient for me to have spent that time to do it so that I could be happy today, right? It became okay for that. And so for the last 10 years, I've just been going on, yeah, this is kind of fun. I'll do this. I'm enjoying it, right? But there's no need to be the great guru on high, which there never was, right? There's never been that need to be the great guru on high. It's just been, I got to make this work I did worthwhile was the thing before that. And now I'm like, yeah, it's kind of fun, right? Now I'm looking for a greater level of meaning. I'm looking for something deeper to work on, something more significant to focus on, right? Something larger than myself, right? And so, we've been sitting with that and we've been sitting with, being differently. And he's like, well, how about you have your coffee outside instead of getting on the computer every morning the minute you wake up? And I'm like, yeah, okay, that seems wise. I did that for one day. I'm realizing that as I said that out loud, I'm like, right, I did that and I enjoyed it and I haven't done it since. That was like 5 days ago, right? So I've got to have a new pattern. I didn't get directly on the computer, but, I was scrolling TikTok this morning, But these things are things that they're pattern shifts, and so you have to remember to do that, which is first thing in the morning. My memory not so good all the time, so um, depends on how you wake up. And so, it's a process, right? You're not going to be perfect every time. I'm not yelling at myself, going, "Oh shit, I screwed up. Yeah, I did it for once and I didn't do it for four." No, none of that's going through my head. I'm just going, "Oh, look at me, I
Oh,
forgot.
look at
Okay,
what
let's start again tomorrow."
that reminds me, like of the boundaries for empaths, the free download that you have for everybody as well, just to mention that. But in there, it talks about rebuilding habits, and it takes 21 days usually to set that into motion. And that's something, like as we have been traveling this journey a while together now, I've been kind of experiencing something similar, in the sense that, you know, 2 months ago, I just got the message that it was time to get the body back in check. And we started talking about this, with what you're going through. And I got the call to go back to the gym, and Spirit's like, you kind of got the mind and the spirit thing going on, but what have you been doing for your body? And truth is, since I left construction work and got, more into this, I had really neglected my body. So, like I've been in the gym, I like everything, I go really hard. So, like I was up at
No,
5
really?
a.m. We open at 5 a.m. I put in an hour and a half in the gym. I go back, I run 4 miles at 3. And, but I've seen an amazing transformation in that short period of time because of pushing that. I also realized that I have that tendency to just overdo everything. And that's one of the operating systems that Spirit's trying to get me to look at a deeper level. It's like, you just, when you become that, I was talking to Kathy about some of this yesterday. And, we had a phone call, and, she's like, you just do everything all the time. It's like every time you're like doing a new ceremony, you're doing another healing session, you're doing all of these things. And, like have you just really looked at why that is? And I'm like, no, I'm too busy doing the things. I'm too busy doing all the things. Right. But, so it's stepping into that new self. It's tricky. I had okay, now the story's coming back. That was the segue. I needed to get back to what Spirit was telling me before. So on Halloween, I went and did an event with some friends here up in Michigan, and we did a shamanic journey, and we went to meet with our Hall of Ancestors. And for the first time, I had one of my Native American ancestors come through, and it was because I've really also, like like I've always shied away from like the guru or the even the leadership role. I didn't want it. And then one of my ancestors came by with a headdress, and he's trying to give it to me. I'm like, I don't want this. And he's like, most great leaders don't, and that's what makes you a leader.
Right.
I'm like, and so like that's something I've been sitting with since then is reimagining what I'm actually capable of and getting out of that mindset that this is what I am, because that is the death of the former self, realizing that just because I've lived a certain way all my life, even through doing all this inner work, doesn't mean that the return to self doesn't come with a new change in that
Right.
self, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And that brings me back. I didn't finish my Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist story. So, I've been working on this upleveling, and so one of the things that I've been doing, and this is the other piece, is I've also been working on upleveling the business to a whole new layer of success, right? And to do that, there's a lot of stuff you got to get through, I mean, there's beliefs around money and people who have money and going through all of this. And no, I've done a lot of that work in the past, but and then I had to deal with the idea of being famous and, what would happen if I was more well known, and recognized on the street and stuff like that, which is really funny because I get recognized on the street all the time here in Panama because of my TikTok channel, which was supposed to be a slice of life for this business, and it actually turned into a here's what it takes to move to Panama channel, because that's what I was doing when I started it. And so everybody, I get recognized around here all the time, and I'm like, hey, this is cool. I like it, And so it's that's because I love people, right? And so that helped me to get over that. But the most recent one has been, oh shit, what was it? My brain just went nope. Um, um, so the most recent piece, where is it? You got it. Think about it. The most recent piece has been about letting go of all the grief of all the times when the business that I was trying to grow didn't grow, all the times it didn't work. And that was something that I was on the phone with Kathy and I was like, I'm stuck. I was deep in first I was in recovery, right? So I was stuck on the couch. I was in pain. I couldn't move, all the stuff. And I was also depressed and exhausted and apathetic about everything. And she and I were talking about it and I'm like, I can't get underneath this. I don't know what this is. And she was just like, I don't know what it is either. And logically, it doesn't make any sense. But Spirit just said, go listen to your grief clearing audio, your sound healing for clearing grief, which, by the way, is on the podcast here if you want to listen to it. And I went and I immediately knew what it was. I was like, oh my God. And it's so funny because I had so many, I actually could not cry at the same time. I was talking to the doctor about the fact that my eyes would not water. You see me wearing my glasses. It's because I can't wear my contacts right now because my eyes won't water enough. And I was literally in this place where I couldn't cry. Now my eyes are getting better because I'm actually processing all this stuff, but I haven't put my contacts in yet, but mostly out of habit at this point, but I literally could not cry when we were talking about it. And so I went and she said, yeah, you have to listen over and over. And I was like, yeah, I know. And so I went the next day or later that day actually, and I listened 5 times in a row. And if you only listen to the section that's just the sound healing, it's 8 minutes. So it's not terrible, right? But I spent an hour, right? I spent an hour just listening to this and processing this grief, and so much grief came up and out. Oh my God, it was so much grief. And I was going through that and I'm like, oh, yes. And so I felt it release. I felt it open up. And, at the same time, sales, of course, started opening up again. Partly because I was starting to feel well enough to deal with it, and partly because I released all this stuff, right? And so, this is something, by the way, if you run your own business, you should know if you're a solopreneur or, a micropreneur, is that your energy will impact whether or not your business makes sales. If you're exhausted, if you're just overwrought, if you're sick, if you're, burnt out, crispy crittered, your business will stop making sales. If you are done with people, your business will stop making sales. Okay. So keeping yourself good, super important for your business making sales. And so, all of this was going on. And so, the grief piece is there. And I need to do some more of that. I'm not done with that processing, but I needed a break. And then I was watching Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist and thinking, oh, I want something light and fun, something that's not like a crime drama, or everything on my TV is so violent. I'm just like, I don't want to watch violence, And so this was something that was non-violent. And so I was like, okay, I can do that. And the last episode, the father dies. I mentally, during the death of the father on the show, did a funeral rite for my old self and allowed the emotions that the show was bringing up for me to fuel the funeral rite for my old self. And I just overlaid them. And this is something you can do. I mean, you don't have to get up and do this huge ritual, right? And in fact, I would argue that what I did is more impactful in a lot of ways, because emotion is the jet fuel of ritual and of any sort of energy work. And so because it was bringing up emotion and it was bringing me to tears, I was like, oh, this is good. Grief. I'm going to use this, right? And so I did the process work of more grief in that process. And I did the funeral in my head at the same time as the man was dying on screen. And I acknowledged and loved the old me and was like, okay, here it is. And I worked so hard, and I acknowledged all the hard work, and I acknowledged all the effort, and I acknowledged all the love that went into that effort. And, you have to do that. You can't just say, oh, this old me sucks. You can't do that. You have to You have to grieve it. You have to love it and grieve it and let it go. And so that's what I did while watching that episode, which of course, if you hadn't built up a relationship with him, you wouldn't be sad. So you have to kind of watch the whole thing, right? But it was super effective for clearing stuff. I mean, I felt very different afterwards. I was exhausted, but I was very, very different the next day. And so, I will still do some more of the sound healing for clearing grief, because there's still some more grief in there. There were a lot of times that I tried things and they failed. There was a lot of grief that I never acknowledged. I just went, fine, whatever, next, right? You just never got sad about it.
The warrior.
I warriored through, like, crank. Okay, move on, right? And so, I'll still do some more of that, but that's appropriate too. When somebody dies, you don't stop grieving at the funeral, right? So, we'll still do that, but it's about letting go of the old you, right? And about consciously setting new patterns, because as we're stepping into the new you, you're going to be, it's important to shift the patterns, the habits, to go with the new identity, right? It's one thing to be like, oh, I'm going to be more peaceful, but if you're still doing everything you used to do every day in the exact same way, then where's that peace going to come from, right? The more peaceful version of you does things differently. When you step into that identity, you do things differently, right? You allow things to land, right? You don't run from one thing to the next, right? You take space in between to listen to your guides and listen to yourself and to let your heart be still and to feel and, all of the things. And so, yeah, all of this goes into the process, right?
Yeah, I think it's perfect timing. I mean, Scorpios, right? Scorpios in Scorpio season. I mean, I did that ritual that you and Kathy suggested. I don't know that I should talk about overly what it is, but more or less it was enough with all the things I'm no longer doing. I was prepared on the other side of what that all looked like. And definitely some things came crashing down to the foundations again, but that's exactly what we wanted. So, why we, I mean, the royal we, and that brings you back down to those emotions. It brings you back down to that state of things that, it's the layers of the work. It's the spiral, like you work on it and then you realize there's a deeper layer of it and you grieve it. Right. And it's that grieving is such a huge part of it, because you realize all of the things that you've done, you have all of the tools, but there's still it's almost like having to go back to the basics sometimes, if that makes sense. Right. Like you got to go back. We teach it and then we're like, okay, that's where I'm at. Got to go back to the basics, the foundation. Right. And sometimes we forget that over time when we're building structures that the weight of the can bear on the foundation. So we got to go back and revisit that. Right. That's, from my construction days. But
we forget about it too. Right.
Yeah. We're on to the next thing.
Right. If I had $1 for every time somebody who was a student of mine looked at me and said, a wise woman once said, when I expressed a problem that I was having and they gave me my own advice in return, we forget, right? So sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that was exactly where I was going with that, as usual.
Yeah. So, this is the work. The challenge that comes in, of course, is the fear, right? I've been doing this for 20 odd years, 28 years or something. 28 years, because I started when I went into my first Saturn return, so 28 years. And I'm no longer in that overt fear stage a lot. Although it did get triggered by the fear of being famous thing, because I was like, oh, you have to be followed around by security guards. You don't get to live a normal life because freedom's my highest value, right? And so that triggered it for a long time. And then I had to redefine it, because I'm like, okay, I got over the fear of being famous, and now I'm like, do I really need to be famous to do what I want to do? I don't think I do, I'm not sure I do. So. But it was just, sometimes we put those things in place to scare us, to keep us small, right? And so, it's always fear. It's just, for me, it's not the thing that goes, can't do that. It's the subtle in the background sort of, you don't want to do that. You don't have to do that. Blah, 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 right? And it's not even fully conscious, right? When you first get started, the fear is right up in your freaking face. It's like, screaming at you. You're like, this is gonna suck. In fact, I've talked to like 3 people in the last week who were like, yeah, I was really scared about starting your program. And I'm like, okay, what about it scared you? And they were like, well, I thought, I'd get attacked by demons or things would come at me or, I'd get in over my head or, that I'd be intimidated by the process or not good at it or whatever. And, then they get into it and they're like, oh, yeah, well, this shit was always there. And, you know, I just didn't know how to deal with it. And now I know how to deal with it. And, you know, I have backup if I feel like I'm gonna get in over my head and, you know, all this stuff. I mean, you and I had a conversation because I did a session for somebody while I was recovering and I called you and said, can you be backup? Because I am not
Yeah.
fully well. And if I need help, I need some place to lean into, right? Because I wasn't well, right? I was not at my full capacity. And ironically, I got on the phone with Kathy just before the session and she's like, "What the hell are you talking about? Of course you're at full capacity." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, you're right. You're not wrong." And I didn't need it after all, but I did reach out and ask for help because, at the time I was still feeling like I wasn't there. And then I got a buck up little camper from Kathy.
She's great at that, isn't she?
I actually asked her for a buck up little camper and she said, no. And I'm like, what? She said, you're not a fucking little camper. You're a big ass badass. It's like, she's like, you don't get a little camper buck up. You get a reminder that you're a big ass badass. And I'm like, oh.
It's funny. I had a session like that the other day. I had definitely a gnarly one. And I was going through it, like the heart stuff's moving and the stuff again. So I'm like, I had just spent like way too long doing things up in the experiential planes, which I'm not super familiar with. So I didn't really know how to come back into my body properly. And I got like 3 hours before this session. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm super light. So I just started playing some metal. And I was like, yeah, because I don't really like that. But it got me into that warrior state, and then I could balance that with the coming at things from the neutrality place. But I had to balance it with some of that, I'm the biggest bad in the room energy. I had to get back to that space. And sometimes, we process, like we're picking up on what we're going to get into right before we get into it too, which is a whole other layer of that.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. When you work for others, that happens. So, and that's one of the things you talked about, when we do this work, when we get to a certain stage, we start teaching other people. Well, you teach because you need to be reminded of the beginnings again. Kind of what it comes on to, right? And so, this is where it goes, and this is why you get to a certain stage and you start to teach, right? Whether it's a single person or many people, it doesn't matter. You do start to teach. Or you inherently go back into the beginning and start over again on your own practice, one or the other. There is a need to revisit the beginning because it's all a spiral, right? So, where am I now? I am still evolving through and I am still actively working on it. The other piece of this is because I have been so directed, right? I've been self-directed. It's just like, do this, do this, do this, do this. So in the past, had I tried to do this process, I would have done it in a way that is totally anathema to it. The exact opposite, right? Which is, I would have said, okay, let's do as many of these grief sound healings as possible. We're going to drag all this stuff up. We're going to dig it out. We're going to make it go, blah, right? And that, of course, is the exact opposite of what it takes to be in the moment, spirit-directed, fully present. It's not a goal-oriented thing, right? the beingness state that I'm stepping into is this state of allowing, seeing what comes, and taking inspired action, not reactive or proactive or anticipatory or panic based or anything else action, right? It is inspired action where I'm waiting for my inspiration to arise and say, oh, I should do this. And so, the challenge with that also means that I got to get the hell off of social media a lot, because especially in the recovery phase, I have been deep in my phone because I have nothing else to do, right? And I'm just like doom scrolling or Netflix binging or whatever, because I have nothing else to do. I couldn't get up out of my chair very much, and I couldn't go. Only so many of my friends would come to see me, and even if they did, I ran out of bandwidth. I ran out of spoons for social interactions very quickly. I could see one person for an hour, and I'm like, okay, you got to go home now. It's like I'm tired, right? I need to go take a nap or whatever. And so, I've got to break the addiction of doom scrolling now, because I've been doing it for a month, right? And so, not to say that I didn't do it before that, right? Because I was. So, and so, there's a lot of that has to be addressed. And so, I'm gonna be working on that, and I'm gonna be doing more of the grief clearing now. But the importance is to stay in the energetic of where I'm stepping into, right? And so that being in that more receptive, more allowing state and less fear-based state, right? Because you can't step into the allowing state unless you are leaning into your trust in the universe. Because when your reality doesn't reflect your intentions, the cognitive dissonance is real, And in the beginning, you want to just work to change that reality. And the way that you worked before hasn't given you the results that you want, right? Or it's done it inconsistently, which for me has been the case. It's been inconsistent. And so to step into a new state of being, it requires doing things differently, right? And so it's not doing things differently. It's doing things differently, right? And so it's not more doing, it's what you choose to do differently, right? Choosing differently what you choose to. And so, it's a subtle distinction, but it is an all important one. And so as we walk through this together, and I'm going to say together, because if you guys are binging the episodes, which many of you are, that's what I hear from people. They're like, oh, I've listened to the entire podcast at least once. I'm like, holy fuck, that is 8 years worth of content. What the hell? And it's like, I haven't even done the math for how many hours. It's an insane amount of hours. And so if you're doing this, you are likely cycling with me and with us, because I know Josh is cycling with me too. And so as we go through this phase together, I am bringing you into presence in the hopes that you will get to hear faster than I did, because, that's my job, is to do it before you so I can shorten the path, right? That's what I do. And so hopefully this has been helpful for you to help you figure out how to make the transition more effectively, more consciously, and to bring your habits into alignment with the new identity that you're putting on, right? That you're embodying. So, any other last thoughts, Josh?
I think that wraps it up perfectly.
Okay, well then, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, please. We are trying to get our listenership up, especially on YouTube. If you are listening to this and it's been helpful to you, please, please, please share this on YouTube. We are really trying to, that's where podcasts get discovered these days, is on YouTube. And if you could share the YouTube of this episode with other people, I would so appreciate it, because this is how we get found. And remember that what you focus on expands, what you intend is what you create. So choose wisely. We'll see you next time.